It was very nice. And then he started booking me. And I started wrestling. And he never said nothing. I was strictly preliminary. I was no main eventer or anything like that. But he kept using me. And as he saw, I started self-promoting. I invited the Italian press to come to the Y. And over there, I did 500 pounds, 5 reps on the bench. I did over 700-pound squat. And so the headline in the sports section came out next day, Il Sansone Italiano, which means the Italian Samson is in Toronto. And then this Italian station owned by a guy by the name of Colombo, saw this and everything else. He invited me in show. When he was in show, he was a big guy, weighed about 240. I had him sit on my back, and I was doing push-ups, and crazy things to self-promote. And pretty soon the Italians love strength.
Yes.
That's why Primo Carnero was such a big deal, you know.
Wow.
And before you know it, man, they start coming, and Frank Tunney was elated. And I started drawing more and more. So finally, Frank Tunney, after I'd been there for about 3-4 months, he invited me out to dinner one time to a Chinese restaurant. I'll never forget it. We sat there. Frank was a wonderful, wonderful guy. I'd always been indebted to him. But when Frank drank a little bit, it could get to him a little bit, if you remember him. And then he would be more relaxed to say what he might ordinarily not say. And he said to me, he says, Bruno, I want you to know that for as long as you want, this can be your home. He says, I couldn't be more pleased with the way you conduct yourself, the way you're carrying, the way you're getting over, the way you're working hard to help yourself to get over. He says, I want you to know that this can be your home. He says, and I also want you to know that I'm so glad that I didn't listen to anybody and kept you here, because frankly, I got a phone call saying that you were bad news, that you were a troublemaker, that you were a hard guy to get along with, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, and I know who gave you the call. I said, I just went like that. He says, well, I just want you to know, he says, that I told that party that if you turned out to be what they said you were, that I would tell you to pack your bag and go back to Pittsburgh. But I want you to know, he said, that I am so pleased that I didn't listen. And for the next year and 3/4, that was my new base, Toronto. And I wrestled out of Toronto all this time. And then, believe it or not, with Buddy Rogers, and let's see how good you were a kid. You weren't in the business really then. Things really went down the drain in New York. Business had really gotten bad. Buddy had really taken the territory bad. And Vince McMahon was doing very bad financially. So what happens, they heard of my success in Canada, and a guy named Ace Freeman, do you remember that name?
Yes, I do.
Ace Freeman called me up and he said to me on Sunday, because I used to go home every other Sunday. I used to go home for
So your family stayed in Pittsburgh while you were up in Toronto. They did not follow you. Okay.
No, sir.
And Ace Freeman was part of Pittsburgh as well.
He was part of Pittsburgh
It must have been very
promotion.
hard for you to be away 2 weeks at a time, to be away from your wife and your son.
It was, but those are the sacrifices sometimes you have to make in life. So when I came home and he called me, he said to me that Vince McMahon wanted to talk to me. And he said, you should give him a call. I said, you said he wants to talk to me? I said, you tell him to call me. I said, why are you calling me? He said, well, he asked me to call you to tell you to call him. I said, no, I'm not calling him. I said, why should I call him? I said, if he wants to talk to me, I said, you tell him. I come home every second Sunday. So 2 weeks later, I come home, and Ace Freeman says to me, Bruno, don't be a hardhead. He said, Vince wants to talk to you. He said, give him a call. And I said, Ace, don't call me again. If he wants to call me, tell him the Sundays I'm home and tell him to call me. If he wants to talk to me, have him call me. I said, I'm not calling him. 2 weeks went by, I come back again, and sure as heck, Vince called. And he said to me, Bruno, before we do anything, he says, listen, he says, I don't want to start rehashing the past. I don't want to start rehashing the past. I just want to tell you, let's go forward. So let's bury the hatchet to anything that might have happened, any bad feeling that might exist. He said, you belong in New York. I want you to come back to New York, says, and I can make things very good for you. I said to him, but I was in New York, and it was nothing but a disaster for me. Why should I believe that coming back now should be good for me? I said, I'm very happy in Canada, and that's where I'm going to stay. He says, Bruno, he says, you belong in New York. But I knew, because I was having correspondence with some people, and I knew how bad things were in New York. So he said to me, listen, he says, I'll do for you what I haven't done for anybody. And I said, what's that? I will give you a minimum $500 a week guarantee. Today sounds like peanuts, but we're talking about
That's a lot of money back then.
62, 63, And I said, no, I said, that doesn't do it. So he says, well, now you're being stubborn. He says, what do you mean $500? He says, you're not making that in Canada. I says, pretty close to it. I said, I'm right there. I said, but more than that, I'm happy here. I says, Frank's TV goes all over Canada. I said, I'm booked in Winnipeg. I'm booked in Vancouver. I'm booked in Montreal. I said, no. I said, no, thank you. So I said, no, I'm sorry. I said, Vince, I'm sorry, but I got to go. And I hung up. 2 weeks later, he calls back. And he said to me, okay, I'll tell you what, he said, even though we really can do this, he says, but I'm willing to, we'll give you $750 a week to come back. And I said, no. He says, well, what is it going to take for you to come back? I says, guarantee me a match with Buddy Rogers. I knew Buddy was behind a lot of the stuff that had gone on.
So you were trying to get through the politics here.
Yeah, well, you know, Bill, I'll say in front of the cameras, if you go back enough, you know that Buddy Rogers and I, there was never a good relationship. Yes, there was a very disliking of each other. He disliked me and I disliked him a lot. And so I said, that was my demand to meet Buddy Rogers. Buddy won't do it. Buddy isn't going to do it. I said, well, then it's your problem. I said, it's up to you to make this thing happen. I said, you want me back? I said, that's my insurance that you have plans for where I can do well. Without that, I says, nothing else matters. I says, I stay where I'm at. He says, I'll get back to you. So him and Toots had a very private meeting with me, and they said, there's only one way we're going to get Buddy to go in the ring with you. We have to let him know that you've been bought for a figure. I said, what figure? He says, $3,500 we're going to tell him. That for $3,500, you're willing to fall for him.
Right.
I said, I don't care what you tell the guy. I said, but that's the only way. So it was a very big secret. Not a soul knew about it. We swore to secrecy at the time. Nobody must know, because if Buddy got a whiff of it, he would fake some kind of an injury prior to the show and not show up, and because of an injury, and the thing would never take off. At the same time, I had a problem because I didn't want to start off with knowing that I was some kind of a double crosser, this and that amongst my peers. So see, nobody knows these stories because this was such a well-kept secret at the time.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're doing this now, finally.
The day of the show, we go in the ring. We go in the ring, and I forget the referee's name, a tall guy, kind of balding.
Dick Kroll?
No, it wasn't Kroll, it was somebody else. But anyway, they got us for the instructions. I looked at
And the
Buddy.
referee knew what the plan was, or no? No. Only you and Vince McMahon.
Yeah, only and Toots Mond. And I looked at Buddy and I said to him, Buddy, forget all the BS you've been told. I said, I'm here to take your title. I said, that's why I'm in the ring, to take your title. So do what you... Now, a lot of people say, was it a real serious shoot? It was never a shoot, and I'll tell you why. Because he looked bewildered. He'd like, what's going on? As soon as that bell rang, if you say you were a kid, you remember. If you remember this, I came charging from my corner, and I picked him up, and I gave him a slam. I picked him up again, I drew him in the buckle like in the slam. Then I threw him up, I says, Buddy, give it up, or I'll break your back. And the referee waved the thing goodbye. And that was it.
That was May 1963.
May 17, 1963.
Right.
48 seconds?
The match took 48 seconds.
Now, there were rumors that Rogers had put out that he had a heart attack.
Do you remember that? So what happened, Rogers now, there's bitter feelings, as you can imagine. He said in a banquet he attended, they said, how could you let this guy, young guy, beat you in 48 seconds? He said that he had a heart attack 2 weeks before, and that he was literally carried from a hospital, on a stretcher from the hospital to the garden. Now, if you knew the State Athletic Commission in those days, I'd like to see anybody who had a heart attack.
Even get near the ring.
Get even near the ring is right. But that's a story. And you know, funny enough, even supposed to be knowledgeable people like the Smells and stuff, they actually believe that, and they've printed that Rogers was literally taken by an ambulance or whatever to take him from the hospital into the ring. What they don't remember, because it's too long ago, 2 weeks prior, I came in and I wrestled Rogers on a TV match. And because Rogers thought of what was to be in the garden, he went along with everything, and what we did on TV was a 9-title match to convince the Italians and the fans that I could beat him. And I came in right away, and we had a few arm drags, this and that, and I threw him up in a backbreaker, and he gave up, but it didn't count because it was a 9-title match.
Right.
You know what I mean? This was to set up for the guard. So here he's talking about having a heart attack 2 weeks before. Yeah, 2 weeks before. Not only did he wrestle with me, but he was wrestling during the week every
Maybe that's
match.
what caused the heart attack.
And that's that's a story nobody knows. Now everybody will know. But that's exactly what happened with the title change with Buddy Rogers.
And that's the story. And that's the story that I came here to hear firsthand from Bruno San Martino, because all the stories were that it was a shoot and Buddy wasn't going to go along. And